There we go. Pop. Oh, the blur.
The blur. Nothing like I got my America hat on and I'm having some Chardonnay.
White girl wasted.
Nothing says America like your
Some Chardonnay.
camo hat and Chardonnay. Dial her in here.
Are we gonna get that pop?
I don't know if it will or not, but let's see. Welcome to Cocktails and Socktails, the podcast where we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals. I swear I haven't been drinking yet. I'm Megan.
And I'm Carly. And on today's show, we're talking about assessment automation with who else but us, and what that looks like in the world of regulatory authorizations, sprinkled with a dash of AI. We are keeping this between us today just because, well, we have a lot of experience in that. And this is our show, so we can do what we want. Megan, what are you drinking? I think we already saw, but
I thought that what would really complement a camo hat today would be a nice crisp Chardonnay.
Perfect.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking the Aperol Spritz.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Listen, I don't know. I was feeling it. I don't know why.
Hang tight. Let me bingle that. Let me bingle what that is for 1 second. I still have a browser full of cookies from earlier. Carly and I were literally looking up cookie delivery online. I'm not proud of my life choices, but here we are.
You know
what?
Aperol Spritz.
Oh, it came up. It's a thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's with an orange liqueur and my favorite, bubbles.
Ooh, La Marca is my favorite.
I do love
Prosecco because it's lower alcohol, and how do I phrase that in a way that doesn't make me sound like an alcoholic? I drink more than I should.
Yeah.
Aperol spritzes are best made one by one. So the recipe is written to yield one cocktail. But what is the recipe? You add liquor and that mixed together?
There's even like a little picture on the bottle. It's like almost like half Prosecco, a third Aperol, and then you do some soda water, but I skipped that part today.
Oh, got it. Nice.
And then garnish with an orange slice. I used to not like these, and then they became popular over the past couple years. And when we were on our European cruise, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have one again and see why I didn't like it. And I was like, oh, fuck, I like this again. I don't not like this. So
I feel like it's like a waste of space that could just be Prosecco in your glass. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like an elevated mimosa because it's that orange, but it's an orange liqueur. So it's not like just watering it down with juice. I don't know.
I got a dirty glass, so my dishwasher's clearly pulling its weight. So sit tight. Yeah. Let me get a clean glass. Oh, Lord. You know what I love is on a Friday afternoon, I'm going to drink some Chardonnay and watch my husband mow the yard out the window. It's the life of a working woman, you know?
I was going to say suburban life at its finest.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my defense, like we've been working all day.
Yeah.
Like what else would I do with my day? But here we are.
Yeah.
All right. So
assessment automation. So
yeah.
Megan.
Okay. So I was like thinking about podcast topics this week, and I'm like, you know what? I have some things to say about this topic of assessment automation. And what do I mean by assessment automation? Oh my gosh. Assessment automation. I've said it enough that I haven't even had a drink yet. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean, so some background. I spent, before coming to Microsoft, about 9 to 10 years doing, well, not the entire time, but I spent a very fair amount of that time I served as a defense contractor, um, putting together packages for ATO. Well, what does that mean? So if you're part of the world of like federal information systems, you know that every 3 years or whatever your cycle is, you have to submit an authorization to operate request to your authorizing official. And I'm really like oversimplifying the process, but it essentially is a series of control families, 18 control families, unless you have some extra ones thrown in there, that adhere to the standard of NIST 800-53, plus some other, like it can be sprinkled with other standards like CNSSI, for example. But essentially there's within that anywhere between, I don't know, the lowest number of controls I think you can have is like 310 or 320. I never encountered any systems with that low of security controls, but all the way up to 500 and some change. And basically, all those security controls, you'd have to go in to some type of tool, whether that was Archer, EMAS, Exacta, whatever the case. They're usually a tool that's been like somewhat tailor fit for the organization, but only in look and feel, like no automation really to speak of. And you would kind of attest to your having met that security control from an organizational perspective, organization, or from a system perspective, depending on, you could authorize either like enterprise packages or system specific packages. Right. So anyway, fast forward after RMF has been happening for a while within the federal space, somebody comes up with the idea of continuous monitoring ATO. So what does that mean? And when I say somebody, like I don't actually know if that was a DoD construct or a federal construct. I should probably look into the policy behind it. But prior to my career at Microsoft, I was supporting the Marine Corps as a system integrator, and this concept, continuous monitoring ATO or ConMon ATO, hit the street within the Marine Corps. And so the parameters of that look a little bit different. It's the same series of control families. However, you essentially have to demonstrate that you are not just checking the boxes once every 3 years and submitting a package and going on about life. Like, you are actually having to structure your assessments in such a way that they're ongoing on a regular basis, and the periods or parameters for which they're assessed are organizationally defined. Like, for example, you would be running, and this is not like verbatim from my experience, this is just as an example, you'd be running vulnerability assessments on a monthly or even weekly basis. You'd be remediating vulnerabilities as a result of the findings of that assessment on at least a monthly or weekly basis, etc. Another example might be account management policy. You would be reevaluating that policy on at least an annual basis, and then you would be prescribing, or you'd be adhering to those prescribed procedures within that policy at least on a quarterly basis. For example, like reviewing unused accounts, deleting, deactivating, etc. So this concept of continuous monitoring is largely, it's very manual in nature. In fact, I'm not proud of this, but one of the things that we did was set up automated reminders in, we used Jira at the time to remind ourselves to check the scans, to remind ourselves to, review access policy, to remind ourselves to, review the logs, to remind ourselves to check the last 24 hours worth of logins to ensure that there were no like after hours or suspicious logins, etc. So, right, when we use the word automated, it is like so vague. It can mean so many things. Like we were just talking about this, that you could truly set up Outlook calendar reminders to automate your reminder to check whatever you need to check to meet those parameters. And that is like completely off base. What I want to talk about today is essentially like the thought process and really my like recommendation and where I see the direction of our federal like not like instruction for doing assessments to be an organization to demonstrate that they have actually deployed assessment tooling that actually does these checks as opposed to just reminding a human to perform these checks, just as an example. And so, Carly, you
Okay.
brought up something really interesting before we started this conversation today, is that we both have experience in the assessment world. My experience is doing that like pre-assessment and like spinning up the package to be ready for an actual assessor or an IV&V team to come in. And your experience is like the other side of like once the package is submitted, you're the person who in a prior life before you came to
Right.
Microsoft would actually be like performing those assessments. What's your
I
experience
agree.
with seeing some of this stuff?
Yeah. Well, so before I get into that, you said a lot, and I want to
I did.
unpack that a little bit.
Sorry.
No, I love it. Because I think also what's really important about this topic is also just kind of talking about how, especially with all the things going on in the world, and there's a breach here, a data leak there, someone's information or secret documents being leaked. Like, there are people out there who are like, well, what's the government doing about protecting these systems? And I think this topic goes to show, like, kind of for people, for lack of better terms, for people who don't know what's going on, like, there are these things in place, and it's just what is going on, or like you said, kind of that lack of true automation, that human element to it is where there are those gaps. Whenever there is like, an information leak of secret documentation, it's always a human who is leaking that. So how can we technically stop that? But to not go down that rabbit hole just yet, so like what you're talking about, authorization to operate packages. There are sets of requirements that systems must meet in order to be operational, and they have to meet them to a certain standard. And these packages are created to show how these systems or these organizations are implementing those requirements, and they are being then checked by an authorization body and pretty much getting like a certificate to operate, like your restaurant's health inspection grade, for example. And that happens every 3 years. And then you talked about continuous monitoring, how that's a part of it. And yes, that's a part of kind of the assessments that I participated in. But then what does that really look like? What really constitute as continuous monitoring? I think we should definitely like dive deeper into that in a bit. But so my experience, prior to Microsoft, I was that assessor going in, checking cyber compliance with regulations, with contractual regulations, since I was working with the Department of Defense. But even before that, when I worked in IT and as I was coming up in IT and the cybersecurity department at my organization, I was a part of some of those preparations for, ATO packages, or get like bringing those packages up to get, signed and approved, or even like prepping for different inspections. And so, it's a lot of work that goes into the prep phase. There's a lot of man hours. Like, yes, there are people that is like their only job, but there's usually, you're preparing for one assessment in April, a very different assessment, 7 months later. And then depending on how some of these assessment goes, you have to like create like a plan of action and submit that 3 months later. So you're trying to work multiple different assessments, multiple different sets of requirements simultaneously, trying to keep it organized, trying to get the evidence that you need to show. And it takes a lot of work. And then assessor, come in, show me this. Well, if I can tell by what you present to me, how much preparation went into it. And like that can be different from like the size of the company, because a larger company is obviously going to have more resources to do that. Um, Probably also a lot more technical things in place to track and to get ready. But the more prepared you are, the easier it is for me, the less work I have to do, the less interaction with me you have to do, because then or like the less holes I can poke into your implementation per se. Because I'm only coming in for like a week, 2 weeks. I'm spending only that much time with information that you potentially spend months on getting ready.
Mhm.
Um, so, and you see such a different, especially with the types of assessment I was doing, you saw a variety of different preparation, a lot of different packages that were being presented. And so as assessors, we had to be able to get the answers and the demonstrations we needed for those requirements, being able to pull that out of whatever you put in front of us. Sometimes we were given, you know, 5 pieces of paper as to cover everything. And sometimes we were given like multiple binders of stuff, so there's like, I think there's a balance of too much, too little.
So
Um,
let me pause you for 1 second. What
yeah.
was the gold standard for you as an assessor? Like, what's the gold standard for documentation? You going into an organization, you want to see an SSP that just has all the controls contained therein and just kind of addresses the control families like boom, boom, boom? Or do you want to see like the outlier artifacts that the SSP maps to, like your configuration management plan, your vulnerability assessment plan, all that stuff? Like, what's
Yeah.
the gold standard in your mind?
Sure. So like there's especially for the assessments I did, or even the assessments that I helped prepare for, because the position that I was in, I kind of did like a document tracking for each of the requirements that the assessors coming in were going to be looking for. But it's really it's kind of a mix. I think it's unrealistic to say your SSP is going to be like your system security plan, um, is going to be able to keep up with all the updates that go with all the other requirements. Like, so for example, for the assessments I did with the NIST 800-171, there were policy requirements. So you are going to have those supplemental documentation for the different policies. But for like the explanation of how you implement it could all go in the SSP. I think one thing that I somewhat personally from experience as well, like your system's going to be changing. Like things are changing constantly. So in order to make sure that that security plan is up to date with all the changes, you know, your SSP is usually a separate document from where all the changes are going, the technical things. So finding something where it's a lot easier to keep up to date, and you just supplement it as like an addendum to your security plan, um, is something that I think seems more realistic, um, than saying
So,
that your system security plan is the be all end all.
yeah, no,
Because
I
my
agree with
question
that.
to that, especially for like the different areas that your system security plan touches, especially if you're writing your system security plan in line your with the NIST 800-171 or even the risk management framework, it touches so many different groups. Like, can you really tell me that they've all read this document?
Right. Right.
Everyone is aware of their responsibility within this. I mean, you
And
say
then it'd
so, or
be,
it's written in policy that I have to take it,
yeah.
but are you really putting this in like your onboarding documentation?
Right. And then you run
Yeah.
into situations where it's obvious that SSP is updated, like it was updated 3 years ago prior to your last assessment, and then you just updated it. I mean, you're
Yeah.
telling me that you do like annual review of your configuration management policy, and it's
I was
like,
gonna say,
where is the versioning for this?
and you're telling me that 0 changes have occurred in your systems,
Right. In three
especially with
years.
as fast as technology is advancing and as fast as companies are trying to advance with it. That means that there are changes going on. Like,
So how often would you go into an organization and see a some type of like audit history or some type of like technical documentation that was a byproduct of things being done within the system or in an automated capacity? Like, would it be normal for you to have like audit logs as a artifact, for example?
Yeah, so I mean that is a requirement for some of the controls within, or that is an evidentiary requirement for some of the NIST requirements in regards to change logs. Like, show me, you know, what your change process, show me something that has gone through that change process so I can see your process in action. But from like a system security plan perspective, typically it would fall in line with updates based off of our assessment, based off of like the annual updates, not necessarily of if there was a major system change mid-year. Some companies, yes, some no. Also, like, it's hard if you only have like 5 people in your IT shop and they're trying to do every day, they do everything. It's
Mhm.
really hard for that to be maintained from a policy and regulatory documentation perspective, because also like some of that stuff is outside their wheelhouse. Like they went
Mhm.
there, they started out like help desk, learned everything that way, and they're more like break fix type guys. But
Mhm.
then they're the ones that are trying to put together all the stuff for this assessment. So they have no cyber security background from that perspective in regards to policy and management and system oversight, et cetera. Um, and so, I mean, I always feel for them, but I also have to be objective from the viewpoint of the standards.
Yeah.
Like, I
So
feel for you,
in your
but
opinion, like the customers that need automated assessment tooling the most are probably not your biggest DIB customers. They're
yeah,
actually your smallest, because bigger DIB customers like have a larger like GRC staff, just as an example. They have dedicated staff to put the ATO package together or the CMMC package together to manage the POAM, to ensure things are closed out, to do their resubmittal, etc. And your smaller IT shops normally don't have dedicated GRC staff. I'm just kind
yeah,
of like speculating, but I've kind of been on both sides where like GRC or governance risk and compliance was kind of an addendum to a different job role, and you just were doing it because like somebody had to do it. And I know that a lot of IT folks fall into that. So, I mean, in your opinion, would you agree that like your smaller IT shops benefit the most from an investment in automated assessment tooling?
yeah. I mean, I think because coupled with that, like with these smaller organizations, there's a lot of benefit to the investment into managed services or more automated tooling, because then that's less stuff that their folks on ground have to deal with. And then this assessment piece is part of that. And I mean, there are tools out there, there are, companies that do the managed service provider piece where they will provide you with the information that you need in order to like do these assessments. Um, but I think there are also opportunities within certain tools and certain solutions that people get or that are out there that can help make this easier even for the big companies, because again, like the more, especially like with the bigger companies, the larger they are, that means like the more business lines of business that they have, so the amount of different regulations and
Yeah.
assessments that they go through
And the more
increase.
complexity
And the
too.
more
Just
complexities because of the networks and separating foreign nationals from US, or your federal from your intel community or from your commercial business. So as like you get more complex, then your assessment packages get more complex. And so how can
yeah.
we make that easier for them?
Yeah.
That's my question to you.
Well, so interestingly, and we promised we would litter this with a little bit of AI. I'm going to pull a page right out of the book of Vishal, and I asked ChatGPT. So for those listening who might not know, Carly and I are both compliance sellers for the DoD for Microsoft. What does that mean? We sell really products that align under the compliance dashboard, is what has historically been called, but I think that's a misnomer. I like to rename. In fact, at the front of every demo I give, I rename our tool the data security
That's
dashboard
exactly what I
because
do.
it's a way better description of
Yeah.
what is within the tooling. And so if you're familiar with the DoD Zero Trust reference architecture, Zero Trust framework, there's a data security pillar that lives right at the middle of all the other pillars. I like to say that's by design because data is at the heart of what we do and what we're here to protect. It's literally our organizational meat and potatoes, and it's like it's what brings everybody together, right? So
Well,
all of like your network controls, your infrastructure controls are literally all designed to protect what is at the heart, which is the data.
and I will, kind of piggyback on that because even if you look at these regulations, you look at the different, the risk management framework, at the center of it, it's all about protecting the data. Whether it be, your own company proprietary, whether it is, government information, but at the center of all security things, it's about protecting the data. And like one thing that I say, which again with zero trust saying like the data pillar is at the center, information protection is the foundation to everything in that data security realm.
It's
Everything
so
kind of
true.
feeds on when you think of data security tools like data loss prevention or labeling and protection, things like that, it's all founded on, again, that's information protection that kind of pulls the rest of the house together.
It's so
So,
true. So, okay. I
so what
like
did
I said,
ChatGPT
I
say when
pulled
you
a
asked?
page
Well,
out
wait,
of
what did you ask
Okay.
ChatGPT?
All right. Let me tell you. I asked ChatGPT, not because I didn't know the answer to this, because obviously we sell this professionally, but because I was just curious. And obviously,
Sure. I mean,
with,
how many people are asking ChatGPT the most random things to see what's going to happen?
I know, right? can,
Whether
can
it's
you,
something that they already know the answer to, or, you know, could
yeah.
ChatGPT produce this for me? Like, I think,
Dude, last
um,
time I had like the sniffles, I was on ChatGPT like, can you take too much Motrin with ephedrine or like what if you have this color mucus coming out of your nose?
I told my personal trainer I was going to trade him in for ChatGPT because I could
Right.
probably get workouts from it.
Well, so Lily was like, maybe you should see a doctor and not be consulting ChatGPT about your symptoms. But it's like,
It's
you
like
just can't.
WebMD, but on crack.
I know. That's what I said.
Oh,
Okay.
well, you know what? I think it's gonna be a little bit better than WebMD because it's probably gonna give you a more accurate information. Because WebMD, every answer is you've got cancer.
I know WebMD has like kept me up many a night. So okay, with
Anyway,
regard
bring
to,
it
we
back.
can't talk really about Copilot. However, I can say that the whole Copilot being geared more towards security is really what gave me the and Copilot as a tool for security operators gave me the idea, like, you know what? Like I'm a security person. Let's ask ChatGPT what I specifically asked, I think, it started as a one page white paper. I said, write me a one page white paper on Microsoft. What did I say? I can't remember. I put it in
You
my chat
said,
with you.
yeah, I
Let
think you
me
said like
look.
Microsoft. Here it is.
Write me a
Write me
white
a what?
paper discussing the use of Microsoft security products to automate security assessments for regulatory controls such as NIST 853. And so I
And
had to
then you
like
said, I'm
massage
not
it.
mad at
Yeah,
this.
I'm not mad at this response. I had to massage it a little bit because it didn't mention Microsoft Purview compliance dashboard at all. I was like,
Yes.
well, I mean, obviously there's a glaring, like glaring delta in your report. So I'll just read you the abstract and then we'll touch on the points. But I was like, this is not in terms of like if a customer was like, okay, I need guidance. I want to automate my security assessments because we spend entirely too much time wrapped up in this. This is like a great starting point. The abstract reads, this white paper explores the utilization of Microsoft security products to facilitate automated security assessments, aligning with the NIST Special Pub 853 controls. The paper highlights key Microsoft security solutions, including Defender for Endpoint, Azure Security Center, Microsoft 365 Defender or M365 Defender, Microsoft Purview Compliance, and their capabilities in addressing 853 requirements. Emphasizing the benefits of automation and streamlining security assessments, this paper provides insights into how organizations can effectively leverage Microsoft security products to meet regulatory compliance and maintain a robust security posture, which that sounds very chat GPT. Like you could probably consolidate that into like 2 sentences, but
Sure.
it's what it is. It's a starting point. But here's what it recommended, which I agree with. I think you could probably add to it quite a bit. So it talks about today's rapidly evolving threat landscape. Organizations fall short in keeping pace with the dynamic nature of security threats. 1,000% agree. Like organizationally, we struggle to keep up with the dynamic nature of security threats. And Microsoft is, by the way, the second most hacked, or not really hacked, the second most attacked organization in the world, second only to the Department of Defense. So we're very well suited to partner with the Department of Defense in thwarting those threats.
Sure.
Automation is a key component of that. It's scalable and it's more efficient, obviously. So that's why we're here. So ChatGPT recommended to me, let's see, Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, agree. MDE provides advanced threat protection and endpoint detection and response capabilities. Endpoints are a really critical component here because we always say our weakest link in our security chain is our end users. And our end users use devices, and those are our endpoints, right?
Yeah.
So like training and awareness for our end users, probably the most important thing that you can do. And unfortunately, that's not something that you can automate on a case by case basis, but you can automate the implementation of the training and then, automating, I guess, the scoring system and removing access to certain like more sensitive information types and locations based on whether or not those trainings have been completed, and implementing things like testing at the end of the training to ensure that they actually understand the data that they have been training on. So end users, endpoints, two critical pieces of the puzzle. And the other thing that is so important to remember is that you can reduce, I think the statistic is something like 80% of your end user targeted attacks by simply implementing multi-factor authentication, all of which normally will occur on the endpoint, whether that is through the Microsoft Authenticator app or through,
Windows
sending.
Hello or
Windows Hello,
yeah.
great point. Biometric authentication or identification, as well as even like sending an SMS code to a cell phone or having like a secondary email, etc. Like huge in reducing attacks on the end user. So it also said,
so I wanted to ask a question. So with that, okay. So we kind of talk about this sometimes when we like play around in our test tenant at work. But the multi-factor authentication piece, burden or benefit?
1,000% a burden. I'm so over it. It kicks my ass. Like I'll be like right in the middle of doing something and it's like, oh, we sent you this over to your phone. And then I'll get to my phone and my phone's like, pop up. You need to update your iOS. Like it's never convenient, but it depends on the data you're accessing, right? It's like if the data that you're accessing is very important, the MFA protocol is going to be more stringent. And so it's like, as an end user, it's annoying. Like 1,000%, I'm a security professional and I'm going to be like the first one to say it's annoying, but it's necessary, especially knowing that it mitigates 80% of the attacks.
Well, especially with all the different apps, like how many, like, I access all my banks on my phone. Don't hack my phone, please. But, all of that is there. Like, as much as it's a burden, I think it's actually also becoming more just normal. Like, I remember at first, I was like, oh, oh, like this is annoying.
You
But
can't be serious with this. Like every single time I log into
every
my
single time.
bank.
But now it's just now like it's just everyday things. And I kind of think about it like when seatbelts became like a regulatory law, like the
Yeah.
outrage at it, and now it's more of like an outrage if you don't wear seatbelts, you know? So it's really like it's just second nature. That was the thing I was coming to. Like there's
Yeah.
all these
Second nature,
security
but
things.
still annoying.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's not annoying, but I think it's becoming less burdensome and the benefit
And you know what's
I think
crazy? Who
yeah.
was the first adopter of MFA, like secondary multi-factor authentication? I mean, and you have to like enable it, but do you remember who was the initial app that did this that you were like, you have got to be kidding me every time?
I don't know.
It was Facebook.
That
You log
yeah.
in, Facebook has that one-time PIN where you either have to go into a trusted app or console and like
I don't
approve.
remember
I
that.
guess you have to enable this, but I have it enabled in my phone and I like straight up don't use Facebook. And when I do, I'm like, like all I need to do is like whatever, like look at this group of this thing that I joined or
Yeah.
whatever, and just like this is why maybe that's why I don't use Facebook is because it's like the juice is not worth
But
the
I mean,
squeeze. Like 15 minutes later, when you finally get authenticated into it, you're like, I don't remember what I came
I
here
don't
for.
remember what I was gonna be looking at. Um, but I mean, I think it is beneficial and like especially as we're now like even the multi-factor authentication is evolving
Mhm.
into um it's multi-factor, but it's not as in like arduous of a multi-factor.
Yeah.
Like like the Windows Hello for Business. It still
Windows
works the same.
Hello, 1,000% the best MFA you can enable.
Well, I mean,
It's the
it works the
simplest.
same. It works the same as Windows Hello. It just has that added layer of a pin. And, and if you want to get more, stringent, you can add a token. You can add to these authentications, but the multi-factor piece, the two, like so when we say multi-factor, we mean you need your face and a pin. It's two things, something you have,
Something
something
you
you
are,
know,
something you
and something you
know,
know.
something you
Yeah.
have. Yeah. So it can be up to 3 types. I
Yes.
feel like there's one more now. Something
And
like
anybody watching this is gonna be like, you guys really are not
you
compliance
guys are
professionals if you don't know
security
this.
professionals, great job. But there's a automatic generated aspect that is
Yes,
internal to the device that is
correct.
like device based, like that device
Right.
providing a credential back to an authentication server that the
Because
end
that
user is
device is
not
registered
involved
to
in.
me. So if somebody else were
Correct.
to try and use like, I don't know, if they had like a picture of my face, it probably won't work or
Yeah.
whatever. Or
And
like they don't
device
know the pin.
compliance being one of those components for
Yeah.
access, also, by the way, which is important. So, yeah,
So,
it's 1,000% annoying, but
all right.
here we are. Okay, so we went
Going
over
back.
MDE, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and where if you're just tuning
Oh,
in, we are
we're
talking
going into
through automated security products that you can help enable your organization to automate their security assessments. If you are like, so we're going to get into this space now of like system or enterprise, right? If you're a system hosted in Azure, we're going to be looking at Azure Security Center, provides a unified view of security across your Azure cloud resources and even hybrid environments. So this is sort of like compliance manager. So compliance manager would be the counterpart that is specific to your M365 tenant or your enterprise tenant, meaning that it's structured around your usage of M365 data. What does that mean? Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive,
depending on
etc.
the assessment you're doing, because there are universal assessments and there is the Azure, but I digress. That's the,
Yeah, well, I mean,
nuance.
you can have both in the same assessment. It really depends on the
Right.
scope. But so Azure Security Center is going to be that security, like that main security assessment landing page for your Azure assets. And then Compliance Manager within the M365 or Microsoft Purview Compliance Dashboard, that is going to be your M365 structured data assessment landing page. And the two can work together to provide results for the same assessment. That's what's so interesting. And if you go into the assessment dashboard, then you can select the type of assessment that you're looking to complete. You can combine assessments to build something customized to your organization. You can even upload assessment methodology that stems from another framework that is not yet in Azure, such as CNSSI, just as an example. So you combine all of those, build a customized assessment template, and then the automated piece comes in that whenever an update is made, like out in your tenant, it automatically comes back and updates the security implementation of that. So depending on if it's like, let's say at the tenant level, Microsoft implemented a change, or you as a tenant owner or a tenant IT professional implemented a change that increased the security posture, that is automatically going to be reflected in your assessment that you have populated within Compliance Manager.
I'm going to pause
So
you real quick right there because
yeah,
I want to add to it. So, we are like to add a little bit more to that. So that within, Compliance Manager is a tool we are choosing to talk about. There are others out there. We're biased; they're not as great. But the one great thing, because why do companies use so much Microsoft? Why do they use? So when we talk about kind of that automation, we talked earlier about smaller companies that can benefit from the investment in some of these tools that do the work for you. What that does is that changes the level of responsibility on you as the company when it comes to assessment A, B, or C. It's called shared responsibility. And a lot of people will pile on more tools or more things that are automated in order to push that IT responsibility onto the tool or onto, Microsoft, for example. And one thing as an assessor that they're always going to ask is, well, what's that shared responsibility? Because based on what you have, it's always going to be different. And the one great thing about something like Compliance Manager or these tools within the Microsoft environment is that it is going to show you exactly and tell you, like, hey, this is all Microsoft, like in regards to CMMC or in regards to 853. This is everything that Microsoft does. Here's everything that you have some type of responsibility to, whether because there's a policy, for example, when it comes to access control, Azure AD does all the work for you, but you have to tell Azure AD who belongs in what access groups. So it's 90% Azure AD, 10% your responsibility.
yeah,
And
that's
so
a great
you have
point.
to show your responsibility, but also they're always going to ask, well, what exactly is Microsoft's responsibility? Because again, depending on, you know, because we're Microsoft, we're going to talk about Microsoft, depending on what tools you have, what licensing you have, what products you're using, what platforms, what solutions, that responsibility is going to change. But Compliance Manager within Microsoft Purview will know what you're using and will take in all that information. And like you were saying, it updates as things change, as we make the products different, as we add features, as we enhance features, it'll add to your assessment essentially. So that work is already being done for you,
Yeah.
that
And
automated part.
yeah, and two of the cool things, or one of the cool things that you'll find in Azure Security Center is Secure Score, and then over in the Compliance Manager, you find your compliance score. And so what's so interesting to me is that like we spin up a test tenant and I look at the compliance score right out of the box. Like out of the box, I didn't do anything to my test tenant, and I'm already at like a 56% compliant. It's like reducing the organizational footprint of responsibility for implementation of security controls. So what's also really cool about Compliance Manager then is that you have the ability to upload your artifacts. So it's like a complete GRC solution in like a single pane of glass because like your SSP, your configuration management plan, all this stuff, you can upload that one time to your Compliance Manager, and then you can actually task out responsibilities and implementations from there, which I think is so cool. It integrates with Azure Security Center. And the other thing that I went out of order here, and I just realized that it integrates
Totally
also
fine.
with M365 Defender, which is a whole other, that's like your more security side of the toolkit. But every configuration change you make to increase your security posture within Defender is going to increase your security posture in both Azure Secure Score and Compliance Manager Compliance Score.
So I know we keep bouncing around this white paper, but you brought up Defender, so it made me think of this. We've talked a little bit about it, but what does continuous monitoring mean to you?
Yeah, continuous monitoring to me, like prior to landing in an organization that was at the forefront of security. By the way, Microsoft is the largest security company, the largest security vendor in the world. Continuous monitoring, I think, just meant like generally, like you're automating uh, some aspects of your authorization or your assessment process. It doesn't have to be all of them, but some of them, right? Like the ones that we have the ability to automate. Like I'm from the world in DoD, and if you are a DoD contractor, then you'll be familiar with ACAS or Nessus. So I'm from the world where you set up a Nessus account, or Nessus has these security centers that are essentially, it's your kind of like dashboard, and then you deploy agents or nodes like out within your environment, and then you can set that to run automated scans based on the IP ranges that are predetermined, and you can, configure them to be very specific to your environment, et cetera. And you can set these to reoccur on a nightly basis, on a weekly basis, et cetera, right? So to me, as long as you're doing like the baseline of like what was, readily available, that would be continuous monitoring more or less. But we know that vulnerabilities in the environment are really just like one small piece of the puzzle when it comes to your risk as an organization. And so now, having, been with Microsoft for coming up on 2 years and like really understanding what is available from the perspective of automation, I now have a completely different mindset on like what is continuous monitoring. Like, and I really feel like the direction that the Department of Defense is going to move, and perhaps our federal authorization authorities is going to move, is such that you have to demonstrate that you have automated tooling across the board. That's data security, that is network, that is infrastructure. Like you have to demonstrate the ability that these things are being monitored. Your critical targets are being monitored in real time based on real world risk, right? So it's
Well,
setting your
automation
outlook.
is part of the pillars of zero trust. So,
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know,
So I really see this moving in a direction to where like your package goes up for the SCA to review for your ATO, and they like go through the security solutions that are deployed in your environment. And if they don't see like Security Center, Azure Security Center, or they don't see Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager, just like obviously because this is the toolkit that we're accustomed to talking about, they send it back and say, you're not really doing continuous monitoring because you really don't have continuous assessment agents deployed within your environment. What do you think?
well, so I mean, kind of similarly touching on what like that last thing you said about, are you really doing like that? Are you really doing continuous monitoring? That was always one of the hardest requirements to find true satisfaction for, because that's the terminology we used, because what does continuous monitoring mean? Or, there's a big, and this is a whole other different topic, but there's a big confusion or melding of risk assessments and security assessments, where risk assessments are, I am going to, I'm going to move to the cloud. What is my risk of moving to the cloud? Before you make that move, you do a risk assessment and then determine, yes, this is acceptable, or like there's minimal risk, or if whatever risks there are, I accept these risks, or here's how we're going to mitigate those risks. Security assessments are looking at how you have your systems and your network set up against a set of controls, whether it's this 800, 171, 853, RMF, CNSSI, like whatever those standards are, that is what a security assessment, and that was always the biggest like heartache, was going in and seeing the same things being like, assessed, like when they would do an internal assessment, which was, falling under security assessments, and showing that as like their risk assessment. I'm like, no dice.
So what do you think? Is security
But
assessment
so,
different than a risk assessment,
oh,
or is it
100%.
just semantics?
I think they're totally different.
So a risk
Totally different.
assessment is security and then some, like risks that are even external of our like security controls.
So risk would be like kind of like I was saying. So risk is like almost like part of your change management process. It's when a major change is coming through to your system, like going to the cloud or adding, a new system in. You want to combine two enclaves into one that have, controlled unclassified information and commercial information. Like, how can we have one house that they all live in, yet they stay to, like, the east and west wing? That's a risk assessment. What is the risk of combining these two types of information under one roof? That's a risk assessment. A security assessment is, all right, like a house inspection. Before you buy a house, you have somebody come in and do an inspection. That's basically what, these assessments that we're talking about, that's like something that they are. They're just like a house inspection. So you are inspecting the system as a whole against a set of standards. A risk assessment is, I want to add this, or I want to take this away. I want to use this new tool. I want to put in Defender for Endpoint. I want to use Defender for Endpoint instead of something like CrowdStrike or whatever. What is the risk like from me moving from CrowdStrike to Defender for Endpoint? Is there a risk? Like that type of thing. Or I want to, a lot of times, especially in the government, Mac OSs weren't able to operate on the same space. So what is the risk of having, my public affairs offices using a Mac computer not on the network? So they are making materials not on the network for us. Like, what is that risk? That's kind of what like a risk assessment is. The security assessment is, these Macs are part of it. So like, that risk assessment is part of that security assessment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The
So
security assessment is a set of standards. The risk assessment is almost like a point in time type of
that's a
thing,
really
a
good way
point in
of
time
putting it.
change.
Your security assessment is more like pointed to the overall assessment that maps back specifically to your security
To
controls. And one
Yes.
of those security control families is a risk assessment
Uh-huh.
or RA control family, of which vulnerability monitoring and scanning is a part of
Yes.
technical surveillance, countermeasure survey,
What
risk
is the
assessment,
risk of
risk
not applying
response,
this patch?
privacy impact assessments. Yeah. Criticality analysis, threat hunting is under there. So it's like more comprehensive, as you were saying. I
Yeah.
really like
So,
that
and so that was
separation.
always, so to kind of go back to the question with continuous monitoring, continue like with an ATO, with RMF, with whatever types of certification, a lot of times they're assessed, every 3 years. There's an assessment period. You're assessed every, like, on this periodic basis. And so that continuous monitoring is to show that you're not only looking at these controls once every 3 years. So how do you do that? Whether it's, I mean, we had to be pretty vague, but like doing an assessment once a year technically could be considered continuous monitoring because it's not defined. But with
Yeah.
something like, say, you were mentioning Defender, with something like the regulatory and compliance piece of Defender for Cloud, that is doing the continuous monitoring, looking at the security controls and how you're secure, like you're securely set up constantly. It's constantly you set the cadence like daily, weekly, but it's like, and even for certain requirements, it's going to look at a different frequency, but it's constantly looking. Like, there are tools out there that will constantly look at how your environment is set up from a technical perspective, um, against these sets of controls, whether it's 853 CNSSI, you know, it's all right there. And then if something falls out of compliance with that control, it will alert you. So you can go see why it fell out of compliance. Is it a
Yeah.
specific endpoint that has not been updated in 3 weeks? Like, if your
Yeah.
policy on your endpoints is that they have to be updated like once a month. And if somebody, goes out on maternity leave and they don't turn their computer on for 3 to 4 months, that endpoint's going to fall out of compliance and
Yeah.
you're going to get alerted.
But it's true. Here's the crux to me now that I like fully understand. It's not just being alerted that something is out of compliance. It's like taking the extra measure of doing something about it, like removing that endpoint from the ability to
Yeah,
access
isolating
protected
it,
resources,
quarantining it.
removing that like AD profile from accessing like protected data within the environment. So it's that like automation of the
Right,
consequence of the vulnerability or the risk that to me like really
right.
brings it full circle. That's so interesting.
So, and exactly like to what you were saying, with like that endpoint's out of compliance and then it automatically makes that endpoint and who's ever attached to that endpoint removes them from certain accesses. That automation, like right now, continuous monitoring is an extremely manual. Like you were saying before, it's an email, like it's an Outlook notification telling someone to go check this.
yeah,
It gets the job done, but it's not truly automated. You've technically automated a bit of that process. And so there are tools out there that take out that and will just check, do the alert, and then even from the alert, depending on what it is, you can automate actions beyond that alert. So that automation piece.
yeah,
But this white
critical.
paper, we keep going down rabbit holes away from the white
I
paper.
know, I'm terrible at this. Okay,
No,
in
well, it's me too,
conclusion,
because I'm like, I want to say something. I want to say
security
something.
is so exciting. We're just like down on this
Talk,
rabbit
Cardi.
hole. Okay, so that Chat GPT really wrapped this up in a solid
Yeah.
way. In
Yeah.
conclusion, automating security assessments with Microsoft security products, but just generally speaking, security products which enable automation, including Microsoft Purview compliance, empowers organizations to meet their security controls effectively. Essentially, it scalable, streamlined assessments, meet regulatory requirements, etc. But I am bringing the conclusion around because what did you tell me the first time that you saw compliance manager? What did you tell me?
Do people know about this?
Because that's
um,
when I saw compliance manager, I was like, where were you? Like all this time, I needed you. You
yeah.
would have made my life so much easier.
Yes. There are many different compliance style tools for assessments out there, but this is something that, especially a lot of the customers that I had assessed who use Microsoft products, you know, it varies here and there, but we do see a lot more Microsoft, but they have access to this and they just didn't know. And I remember like in one of my interviews, and I mean, he gave me a favorable because we geeked out about it for like 20 of my like 60-minute interview. Because I'm like, I just want to go tell everybody about this. Be like, did you see this? You see this? You got access to this? Like, because like
She's a
so,
shoe in for sales.
but I say that because as an assessor, I mean, this would have made my life easier because
Yeah.
if I'm like, hey, like, did you show me this or whatever? You could go into compliance. You could even show me compliance manager and like there's an evidence tab and you can store stuff in there for each of the requirements.
Yeah.
Um, and so it keeps it all in one place. And then when you have to go around to do your annual assessment, all you have to do is update it. And then kind of like you said, you can assign specific requirements to other people. So like
Yeah.
especially with the NIST 800-171, it's not just IT that has to be involved. It's your physical security folks, your facilities folks, it's your HR folks. You can assign requirements to them and they go in, they type in the implementation, they attach the policies and evidence or they update, as per their policy update policy. Say that 5 times fast.
Their pup policy
They're
update policy.
yeah, they're pups.
We're
Yes.
just making up acronyms. It's fine.
Hey, I like it. They're PEP. Um, they can do you, and all you have to do is check that, and then you can even export that, attach it to your system security plan, and you're not having to go in and like cross-check spreadsheets
Yeah.
because
Or my
assessments are
favorite
being,
feature is literally a CSV export because you can
yeah,
massage that normally and do a CSV import into another GRC tool like EMAS. The Marine Corps is using something called MCAST, which is really just a reconfiguration of Archer that's tailored to the Marine Corps. But like one of my favorite features of Archer was the ability to do an import of your entirety of your poem and security controls. So
yeah.
it's like you're just like making it
There's
so simple.
Well, and yeah, and like there is some things to be desired. Like you can't really track your plan of action and milestones in there. You can export the CSV to see what areas you truly have like poems for, but
Mhm.
you can't track it in there. So there's that part of it.
Mhm.
But and the it's all kind of based back to the 853 and some other, but like again, and I say this in like to like the CMMC perspective, right? Um, the control, aware an awareness and training control has three objectives in the alpha that someone is being um, assessed against. But in compliance manager, it's like 7 steps because compliance manager goes that extra step to break down each of the requirements into what it actually is. So, I mean, it's good because it breaks it down for you, but it does not in the tool give you what like a DIBCAC assessor is going to be assessing you against and like from the scoring perspective. But it makes it, and I think, but part of that, like as I've been here in the tool, in Microsoft Defender for Cloud and seeing how things all match up, it's because it's going to replicate it across any assessment. So I might be filling in information for, um, 800, 171, but those same requirements that fall under the 853, because that 800, 171 is broken down in the way it is, that
Mhm.
same information will show there because I'm already implementing it. Or like in
Yeah.
Defender for Cloud, each tab is whatever set of requirements you want to look at.
Yeah.
And if I fix it, if I'm looking at my 853 tab and I see that there's like something's been alerted that I need to fix and I fix that requirement in there, I can click over to the 800 171 tab to the same requirement line item with like least privileged access, for example, because this is one that I looked at. Um, you fix it in 853, it's going to show us fixed in the 800 171. So it's replicating it. So you're fixing it once, but you're touching multiple assessments.
Yeah.
So while there are complaints and there are some things to be desired, but when you do the export for like the CMMC, when you do the export, even though in Compliance Manager, it's broken down into step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5 to implement this, it's going to show you 3.1.1. It's not going to show you it's going to give it to you as the regulation, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, it does totally. And that's like really
So,
important to point out. Like with any tool that is automated,
yeah,
it's going to help you like scale as an organization to meet your ConMod assessment. There's going to be like things that have to be addressed here and there. It's not like perfect across the
right.
board, but that's not to say that that doesn't mean like we're done, driving toward that. And I
Mhm.
always say
Again,
it, and I've
yeah,
said it
100%.
twice today already, like don't let perfect be the enemy of good. The fact is that implementing these automated assessment measures, starting from a place where you're like literally where we were, is like setting up Jira alerts to like be sent to admins across the environment. Like by upgrading to the automated components for assessment, you're like fast forwarding like 100 years. It's just such a marked difference on like what is most efficient for your environment, and like what
Right.
is your resources from a like time personnel perspective are typically the most finite for an organization. So these tools are essentially freeing up your most expensive resources to do the real security work and not have to focus time
Yes,
and energy on GRC
100%.
tasks.
Like even with some of these finite, nuanced, you know, oh, I wish it could do this. Because I mean, some of this, yes, I can say, like, I've seen it could be desired, but that aesthetic essentially is because that's essentially what it's when people have complained about, well, it doesn't give me like the DIB-CAC score. The DoD scoring for the 800 171 is not perfect either. Um, but it's showing you what's most important, what's going to be like that low-hanging fruit, but also give you, in a sense, get you to the most compliant. Um, the aesthetics will change, the aesthetics can get better, but the meat of it, it's doing the meat of it. And like you said, it frees up people from doing tedious work to doing more important security work or being able to handle multiple assessments at a time. I mean, I know when I first started working in IT, and really it was just to call the help desk was all I knew about IT. We had a CCRI 2 months after I started, and then started gearing up for a CSSP and then another CCRI, and then I left and started doing assessments here. So, or in my previous job. So, I mean, like, it's just assessments are constant. And if this can free up the time for your people to be able to work on ATO packages instead of having to like prep for an assessment, even better. So,
Okay, I
I'll
just
get
want to
off my
tell you.
soapbox.
No, I love it. I love like this is the thing is that people who do GRC professionally, like it's a little bit of like a black sheep of the
Yeah.
cybersecurity community because it's like, oh, like you do
It's
basically you do
boring. Yeah.
spreadsheets, like, but my my soapbox for this is that that's like where I started, and I had a better understanding of the entirety of the ecosystem and the entirety of the
Mhm.
controls and the security requirements as it pertain to the entire organization. Like my husband works in physical security, first personnel security, and he's transitioned into physical security professionally. And I'm like pressuring him to get like CISSP cert and things of that nature. And he's like, no, 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 I don't do IT. And I'm like, you don't
It's
understand.
not.
Security is an ecosystem. It impacts every facet of your organization. Like people are a security risk, just like doors can be a security risk, just like vulnerabilities can be a security risk. It's just one facet. And starting in GRC really allowed me to see the big picture from a security
100%.
perspective. And it was only then that I could determine, like, wow, this data security stuff is really intriguing to me. I think I'd like to focus there as opposed to not really seeing the entire picture. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Similarly, I was just gonna say, just to piggyback off of that, because that's exactly like it is like the regulatory and compliance is really for someone who's not as I like to say, classically trained in IT or computer sciences. Um, you know, we all can't be Frankie Grosses who who wanted to like break things and rebuild them from like, a young age. Um, it's it's the way to get in. That's how I mean, that's how I learned. Like how you said that's how you learned, that's how I learned it. And because especially with regulations and compliance, you're getting that holistic picture. And you don't necessarily need to be a network genius. Now, when I did start becoming an assessor, I had to learn more about network diagrams and what different things were. But that's why a lot of times in these IT departments, or even like with technology today on YouTube, there are smart people out there who are willing to teach you and who want to share their knowledge with you to break it down. And I would just sit with, and I always said this with love, like the geeks, um, to learn, because then I could break down geek speak to layman's terms, and that's how I learned it. And, it just made me, more knowledgeable, and it helped me become a better assessor, and it helped me become a better, just in a thought process around data security to where we are now. So,
That is so true.
Compliance is like the easy way in if you want to learn about IT or understand things
See,
about
and
it,
I would
because it's
argue
just
that. I would say it's not the easy way in. We say, like, example, two females working as compliance technical specialists it's like we get thrown into this like, oh, it's like you started as an EA, I started as basically like glorified help desk. Like two females, like put them on compliance. They'd be best at that. But compliance is misnomered. It's data security. And like
Yeah.
you're really selling our abilities short. Like attention to detail, check. You need it to work in data security. But the fact that it's compliance has this like taboo vibe about it, like it's not real security, that's absolute fucking horseshit.
Yeah.
And I don't agree. And I think that you have to be just as technical to work in compliance portal, to
Oh,
work in data
100%.
security, as you do any of the other more traditionally like network or infrastructure centric security fields. Okay, Carly.
Yes.
The last thing I want to talk about today, because it's all
Yes.
about automating your assessments, but there's
Okay.
one part that we know that is extremely difficult to automate, and that's policy.
Mm.
Okay. So I
Okay.
asked ChatGPT to write me. I actually sent it to you in chat so you can take a look at it. I said,
Oh, I
write
was gonna
me
say,
a
when did you do that?
configuration management plan, which is just one of the many policies. Because if you have access to
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and by the way, it's free.com, you
Oh,
go
you put in
to, hell yes,
like
I did. I said, go
I
to,
was
it's
like in
HTTPS colon hack chat.openai.com. Okay, this is the freeware version. I said, write a configuration management plan for a Department of Defense system that meets 800
oh
171
goodness.
controls. And actually, I realized the conflict of
Don't
that
put me on this
statement
spot.
because there wouldn't be a DoD system that was 800 171 controls. It would like be a DIB or SI system. But just for
Yeah,
the
but
sake of, I've had 2 glasses of wine and we're going to ask Chat
I
GPT.
get it. You were
But it
trying to combine
wrote
two
me,
worlds.
well, I just, whatever. The point is, if you are not using AI to like at least start with a baseline. I'm not saying that this is like the end all be all. Like, don't be that high school student that just copy and paste the entire thing and doesn't like double check and turns it in as your paper. But use this as a baseline for a template
Or if you
to,
don't know what to do, like,
yeah,
or if
to
you don't know,
build
like,
out. That's exactly right. AI technology, like as much as the argument is going on about like AI is going to take over humanity, whatever, like in the meantime, use it to beef up your security controls, use it to write your
listen,
policy for your security assessments.
I think like
So,
anything, AI is there to help supplement and increase efficiencies. I'm actually going to use this because I personally have not used ChatGPT that much. I probably
what?
should start playing with it. Yeah, I don't know. Listen, there's still a little bit of tinfoil hat me. Um,
I like, I'm in the tinfoil hat club and I'm like,
I know.
AI, like, fuck yeah, let's
Listen,
do it.
there
But
are
I feel
still
like I have to
listen.
preface every AI like request with treat me as if I'm a tinfoil hatter and write me a CMMC assessment, whatever, whatever.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's an air to I don't know, like I think it's just like the security paranoia that I have evolved in and grown up through that still even though I work in this field, like I'm still like, I mean it's cool. I really like what it does, but I'm not gonna use it. Yet.
I wouldn't use it for
There's
anything
always a yet.
personal, but I say that, and here's the deal. If you have been a DoD contractor for any amount of time at all, then you have experienced the OPM breach of 2015. What
Yeah.
does that mean? That means China already has ownership of your data. China probably, if you have a Roomba, is already like
Listen,
aware of the square footage and the rooms of your house.
let
So
me live in my bubble. I
maybe
don't have a Roomba
don't.
though.
I'm just saying, so maybe don't pad up their data store with like asking ChatGPT a bunch of personal questions, but do ask ChatGPT about writing you configuration plans
Policies,
that
yeah.
meet regulatory requirements.
Like, I mean, I wouldn't ask ChatGPT what the weak points of the, a federal building's
security.
Oh
my God, don't even go down that.
No, right. Yeah. No, anyway, but
I understand what you're saying.
You asking it to write this policy while we've been talking reminded me.
It did it in under 1 minute, by the way.
Reminded me that I have to throw ChatGPT at, because I have friends that are like, hey, can you proofread this for me? Can you help me write this? Does this sound okay? I'm gonna be like, ask ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Go
for real.
bingo AI. I ain't got time for that. I got work. I
The
got
thing
my own
is
job to do. I can't
I
do your
have
job.
yeah, I've put many things in ChatGPT, and every time I look at it and I'm like, all right, it's basically, it provides you like a skeleton. It doesn't sound like me. It doesn't add that extra level of I'm a very verbose. I litter things with more
You like
adverbs than are
fluff, yeah.
necessary. Exactly. So
It's
it doesn't
it's
do
gonna
that
give you
for
that
me.
technical, yeah. It's not gonna give
It's
you the
gonna give me
personality.
exactly.
Sorry.
It's very efficient. It's going to make it happen fast. And if I know that I only need to go in and proofread a paper and add my kind of nuance to it and add my personality to it, I'm way more likely to do it quicker and turn it in on time, or submit it for blog posts or whatever on time. And it's in a timely fashion too, timely to the discussion that's happening in real time on whatever the case may be, like LinkedIn, other sites. Gartner has a summit coming up. ISC Squared has their annual conference. So case in point, I wrote a submission for ISC Squared to speak as a I guess what is it called? Not a panelist, but to present a presentation. I submitted a presentation for the ISC Squared Annual Security Conference, and I probably spent an hour and a half thinking of what to put together. And in hindsight, I'm like, why didn't I give it the Chat
Why didn't
GPT?
I
I
think of
don't
that?
know, because you can refine their responses very specifically, such that it's very reflective of what you mean to convey. So it's pretty cool stuff. And if you're a security professional now leveraging that for some of your most basic functionality, what are you doing?
Right. So,
all right, with that said, where's my OneNote? Where's my super suit? Thank you for listening.
Why do you need your super suit? Anyway.
Well, that's earlier when I messaged you and I was like, I'm going to go fix my face. All I could think about was the Encanto when the Felix was like, Camilo, fix your face. And I got to do one of these with it.
Too funny.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Thank you for listening to Cocktails and Socktails, the podcast where we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals.
Yes, and thank you all for joining us today as we talked about assessments and how automation can make the prep and experience better. You can find more details about the show in the notes below, and you can find Megan and I here at Cocktails and Stocktails on YouTube every single Wednesday. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and like this video, hit the notification so you never miss a beat. Cheers!
As the global black belt, Matt Littleton said at one point, and I quote him all the time, and this is not even a direct quote, but I love it.
Wait, are you allowed to quote him?
He said it to me, so I can quote him. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'm quoting him. He's basically a celebrity.
Okay. Just checking.
Somebody is going to pay for it, right? The organization, from the perspective of advanced licensing, that is going to automate these things for the environment, their end users. The organization, from the perspective of breach, they'll pay for it. Look at OPM paid out $60 million settlement to essentially victims of identity theft from the OPM system, right? Or the end user is going to pay for it from the perspective of your efficiency. And what does that really mean if you're a federal system integrator or part of the DIB or a DoD? The end product that you're providing in the name of national security, your end user is going to pay for that from an efficiency and operational perspective. So somebody's going to pay for it? Wouldn't you rather invest in the licensing to automate these things up front so that you're not paying for it from the sake or the perspective of your name being front page news because you either got hacked or can't meet the mail when it comes to securing data?